everybody, it's Miss Fiodi. I hope everybody is having a really good weekend, and hopefully you've already started studying for your awesome physics test. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of help on number 5 because I've heard from a few people that are confused, so let's go through it. And this is my first time making a video, so please don't laugh too much. Also, if you hear quacking in the background, it's because my ducks are on the porch making a lot of noise. Okay, here we go. So in this problem, I drew a very awesome diagram where you can see that a ball is started 1.5 meters above the ground and it's thrown straight up into the air and straight back down. Okay, so what it wants us to do for the first part is find the initial velocity. And if you notice over here, I broke down the diagram into 3 really useful portions. One where you're giving it initial velocity and it goes to the peak. The second portion is where it starts at the peak and it goes down to the original place that it started. And then the third section is where it goes down from there all the way to the ground. Okay, so for the first part, I only really care about section 1. Things that I know. T is 0.9 seconds. I know the velocity at the top is 0 meters per second, and that's always, and remember that's really useful and it's usually not mentioned in the problem. And G is negative 9.8 meters per second squared, which means I definitely decided that up was positive. Okay, so I'm finding V naught. I picked this equation here because it had all 4 of these things in it. And since I want to find V naught, I need to rearrange my equation to solve for V naught. So that was a little bit of algebra. And then all I did here was plug in my numbers, being really careful about using parentheses with my negatives. And then from there, I found out that my initial velocity was 8.82 meters per second, and that's positive, so that means we're going upwards, which makes sense, right? Okay, and I need to be able to get us to the next page. Hold on. Aha, I magically figured it out. Okay, moving on. So this is our next page. For part B, it wants us to not allow me to show you for some reason. Okay, here we go. It wants us to find the final velocity when it hits the ground. So we're going to be operating over here in section 3 from where we left off at the original point all the way down to the ground. Stuff that I know. My height is 1.5 meters and that's going down. So I really need to make sure that's a negative right there. Okay, so that's really important. If you got this problem wrong, that's probably your mistake. We know that V naught, since we found it from the beginning over here in section 1, when it was positive 8.82 meters per second, over here in section 3, sorry, that's my dog Mabel, in section 3 it's going to be negative 8.82, and G is negative 9.8 still, and it wants us to find the final velocity. So I picked an equation that had all 4 of those things in it. This one's really nice because it's almost solved for V, except I have to square root both sides. No, that is not squirt, that is actually square root. Okay, and so I rearranged things and I plugged in, and I was really careful about using parentheses with my negatives. Okay, and for this I got my answer to be 10.35 meters per second, and that is downwards. Another way to represent that would be with a negative sign out front. Okay, so that's my final velocity right before I hit the ground. Alright, and moving on to the last part, it wants us to find the total time in the air. Okay, over here in section 1, I know that my time is 0.9 seconds, so that's easy. Over here in section 2, I know that because of symmetry, it takes me the same amount of time to go from the peak back to my original point, so that's also 0.9 seconds. So at the end, I'm going to remember to add those 2 together. Then, to find out the time in section 3, it's a little bit trickier. Stuff that I know. V naught, we found that in part B, or sorry, we found that from part A, and we made it negative to go along with section 3 over here. Final velocity is what we found in part B. We know G is still negative 9.8, and Y is still going to be that negative 1.5 because we're going downwards. Okay, so I'm supposed to find T. The equation that I chose was this one. If you notice, my method for this is doing it without the quadratic formula, and that's mostly because we already know final velocity. So because we know that, this equation is really simple to use. Okay, and I know some people don't want to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so I need to rearrange this for T, so I did more algebra there, and then the next step is going to be plug in.